Good to see you again. I was slow to appreciate how much silent films have to offer, but seeing this film was a big part of my conversion. I was fortunate to see it with live musical backing, which makes a massive difference, but even with the recorded track, it's a great viewing experience. It is funny, charming, nostalgic, and it's Australian, which is another reason to love it. There are maybe a half a dozen silent films genuine fans must see, and this is one of those films. It is The Sentimental Bloke from 1919. Australia had been an early film industry leader, producing the first ever feature-length film and producing a large volume of early content. After 1912, the industry began its decline as a result of studio and distribution company consolidations and the increasing influence and control of American studios. By the mid-1920s, 94% of all films shown in Australia were American-made. In 1915, The Songs of a Sentimental Bloke, the film's source material, sold over 60,000 copies and had made its way to homesick Australian soldiers in the European trenches. It contained the earthy, humorous poems of C.J. Dennis that had first appeared in the Sydney Bulletin. Raymond Longford first encountered the book when American studio executive J.D. Williams loaned him a copy and suggested it was worth turning into a feature film. With finance from the Southern Cross Feature Film Company, who had funded his previous film, The Woman Suffers, Longford approached C.J. Dennis for the film rights. Dennis was reluctant to sell, fearing it would affect book sales. However, prolonged negotiations led to a royalty payment of £1,000, which was half the film's budget. Loiite, Longford's wife and Australia's biggest film star at the time, played a number of roles in this film. She was cast as the female lead Doreen, plus worked as locations assistant, editing assistant, assistant art director. She selected the intertitles and co-wrote the film's screenplay. While Dennis's poem was set in Little Lon, a slum and red light district in Melbourne, the movie was shot in 1918 on location in Woolloomooloo. With the orchard scene shot at Hornsby Valley, near Sydney, the interiors at open-air sets at Wonderland City at Bondi, and some shots of sunsets and sunrises for the intertitles were created in Adelaide. At first, officials refused permission to use authentic police uniforms in the film, but eventually relented, with some officials even appearing as extras playing police officers. They were also refused permission to film at actual public utilities, but were allowed to film at an old watch house in Woolloomooloo that doubled as a jailhouse. The scene on the park bench in Sydney's Botanical Gardens, like many others shot, was completed illegally without a permit to film there. When filming was taking place, Woolloomooloo was a rough working-class area that is a far cry from the gentrified district, which is now a highly desirable place to live. And this provides an added layer of historical interest. C.J. Dennis makes a cameo appearance in the film, playing himself. The film's theatrical release was postponed due to exhibition chain Australasian Theatres refusing to screen it in their union theatres. However, it was seen by E.J. Carroll, who later established the cinema chain Birch, Carroll and Coyle. Carroll distributed the film in Australia and overseas. The film opened in Melbourne in October of 1918, in Sydney a fortnight later, and was first screened privately at Adelaide's Wondergraph in November. At Melbourne Town Hall, the film broke all existing box office records, was popular in Britain and New Zealand, but did not succeed in the US, where test audiences failed to understand the language. Despite being recut from Americanised intertitles, having some scenes cut out and being renamed as The Story of a Tough Guy, it was withdrawn from distribution in the US. Now, films should always be reviewed in the context of what was being produced at the time, and compared with most celebrated filmmakers of that particular period, like Maurice Tournier, Victor Sostrom, Cecil B. DeMille and D.W. Griffith, this film has a charm, a freshness and a cheekiness that weren't evident in other films. At this time, even Chaplin was only making short films, his most important film to date being Shoulder Arms from the previous year. It was a different response to the horrors of the First World War, and while amusing, is much less clever and engaging. The Sentimental Bloke remains one of the most distinctive films of its year. It is also important to reflect on the societal mood of the time. Following the carnage of the First World War, where just about every family was touched by grief and loss, The Sentimental Bloke would have been a welcome tonic. It was not the first nor the only film to have been adapted from a poem, as this was a common practice in the early years of cinema, but those films were typically weak due to the thinness of the material. This film does an excellent job of capturing the rhythm of the original poem, which is both clever and unusual. The Sentimental Bloke is far and away the best film of its genre. Another strength is the film's naturalism, from the acting style through to its focus on the everyday lives of working class people, and effective use of location shooting. Most US and European films didn't embrace this style until the mid-1920s, meaning this film was leading rather than following world cinema trends. E.J. Carroll sponsored a stage version of the book in 1922, produced by Burt Bailey and starring Walter Cornock as the bloke and Tal Ordell as Ginger Mick. A sequel, Ginger Mick, was produced in 1920, as well as a 1932 talkie remake and a TV movie in 1976. A televised short film ballet adaptation was released in 1963, but none achieved the look or the status of the 1919 original. A 1952 fire in a Melbourne film library destroyed all but 2 boxes of film archives, one of which contained a complete 35mm nitrate positive of the Sentimental Bloke. It was sent to Sydney for duplication onto a new 16mm acetate stock. The new print was screened at the 1955 Sydney Film Festival to great acclaim, although Longford wasn't invited as the organisers didn't realise that he was still alive. Another better quality print of the film was discovered by chance in the George Eastman House archives in 1973, where the cans were titled The Sentimental Blonde. It was sent to the Australian National Film and Sound Archive, where it was fully restored and had a revival screening out of competition at the Cannes Film Festival in 1987. The fully restored version was released in Australia in 2004. So lots of good reasons to watch this film. It's more charming than funny. It is a fascinating historical document for anyone even remotely familiar with the Sydney area. And thanks to the poem, the film has a melody that makes you want to sing along. So I'd actually watch this with a group of people. You'll have a lot more fun. So again, what I'd suggest you do is go to our website, find our virtual screenings page, find the link to this particular film, click on it and watch it. And as always, see what you think. Come back, share your thoughts with others about whether you'd recommend this particular film for them. And then we'll see you back again in the not too distant future for our next Classic Films review. See you next time.